Okay, here we are. World War II is coming to an end. And let's take a second to remember where we've been. I know we kind of took a little pause there in between. We took a pause for a sec from the action, from the actual fighting, and we're back. So if we remember in 1939, 1940, 1941, the Axis forces of Japan and Italy and Germany were winning. They were expanding and taking land. And starting at the end of 41, we saw, well, really the beginning. 1942 is the year that the tide shifts. We see the Allies starting to win and starting to take back land. And that trend continues. In 1943, there was a famous meeting in Tehran where Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill get together and they discuss a war strategy. And the idea is that the Allies, who had taken Africa or parts of Africa back in 1942, were going to first come up and take Italy. They called this the soft underbelly of Europe. Winston Churchill said the Italians are just not that tough. So they first take Sicily, which is this island here, right off the tip of the boot that is Italy. Some people would call it the soccer ball for the Italian foot or boot. And now they're gonna, next step is to get into Italy itself and to take Italy back. So the order of operations again was Africa, in Europe, Africa, Italy, north, okay? And then we're gonna see that they come into France, but first it was Italy because they thought the Italians were weaker. Also, while all this was going on, Russia was attacking from the east, taking back land that Germany had taken in Eastern Europe. So after the fall of Sicily, the Italian king, Victor Emanuele, arrests Mussolini. And then in a daring midnight raid or whatever, the Hitler's German forces come in and they take Mussolini back. Hitler was pretty loyal to Mussolini. They still are controlling land. Let's take a look here at this map of Italy. What you can see is that in early 1940 or late 1943 now, so now we're September of 1943, the Allies had slowly started gaining back land. You can see it here in the red dotted lines. So the Italian king wanted out of the war, but Hitler was like, no, right? We got this. We're not going to play. We see in January of 1944, the Allies land here. Okay, and they take back this coastal region. But I think that when you take a look at this map, what you're probably going to see is that this is a slow battle. Okay, it starts in September, and months later, it's up here in this part of Italy. This is really, really going to end up being a hard-fought victory. Okay, and we're going to find that slowly but surely, the Allies, the Americans and the Brits, are going to take back the peninsula that is Italy, and eventually, they're going to get to Rome. Okay, here's Rome on this map. And then they're going to cut the areas in half. These territories you see here in green were lost by September 1944. They had taken all this land all the way up to and including Rome. And this area here is still going to be under German control, but they got Rome, right? That was the big step that they wanted to get. And we'll see that on, June 4th, 1944, the Allies take Italy. Right? Italy is officially taken. And the reason I bring up June 4th is because 2 days later, they launched the attack on France to take back France. So this was it, right? They said, look, we gotta take Rome. As soon as we take Rome, we'll cut off northern Italy, and we're going to go, because the Germans were much heavier in northern Italy. They didn't really control the peninsula as much. And then the Allies' war plan was, then we'll get into France, okay? right here. And this is D-Day. Okay, this is the day where the most Americans die in the history of any battle of any war. Okay, this is the first scene of Saving Private Ryan, Omaha Beach, and it's such a well not discussed fact. Here is the areas where they landed, and there were different groups. So it was the American group, the British group, the different groups that were going to attack at different times, and only the Americans hit the hard part. Other countries, the British, maybe even the French or the Canadians or Australians, maybe they breezed in. Okay, and there were paratroopers that were dropped behind. They were supposed to weaken the beach. We, the Americans, hit Omaha Beach, which was the strongest German fortification, and it was brutal. It was a horribly hard fought, bloody victory. But the U.S. and the Brits take back the beach on June 6th, 1944. And the next stop is Paris. Okay, they're gonna get back Paris. Also at the time, a lot of the Southern resistance forces are now gonna try and fight back. They've been doing more terrorist attacks from the South, which wasn't as heavily occupied. It was under the control of like French Nazi friends, right? The Vichy, I believe, but the La Resistance is going to fight back. And August 1944, Paris is taken back. The last major offensive by the Germans as they're marching their way. So here we have all of France now is being taken back. Belgium, right? And the Americans and the British, Netherlands are taking back all this land. And the idea is, look, we're going to get to you. We're going to get to Berlin. We're coming into Germany. This was the German border. And the last offensive is a battle called the Battle of the Bulge, where the Germans send all of their energy to try and push back one more time. And it works. Okay, they here were the lines, and they were able to push back and take this little chunk of land back. And it was a bulge, right? In the line, the line, offensive line now of the Allies who are coming into Germany. But they stopped them, right? They say, okay, you took back this little chunk of land. Again, Ardennes Forest, boy, this area had a lot of action. The Germans felt pretty strong about fighting in this area, but they stopped them, the outlines here, and then they eventually pushed back once again. And really what we're going to see is, I believe, February now, 1945, the second peace conference. And I'm going to get into these in my next section, but basically what they decide is they say, look, we, the Americans and the Brits, we're going to go to the concentration camps. We're going to free them. We're going to go down to Austria. We're going to work our way up. And we're going to move into Poland, okay? And Russia said, let us get Berlin. Let us get Berlin. So by March 1945, the Allies had crossed the Rhine River. They linked up with the Soviets in April at the Elbe River. This was a slow advance. The Soviets had beaten the Germans at the Battle of Kursk, which is famous because it's the biggest tank battle of all time. And as you can see here, in 1944, they took back all this land that you see here up to this line right here. At the end of 1944, at the end of 1943, they had taken back this land, right? So the Germans had gotten as far as the dark green. They owned the light green. They lost this light green area in 1943. They lost all of this light green area in 1944, including down here, all the way up into Poland. And in 1945, again, here's Berlin. The Soviets are the closest. And the Americans say, let us do the concentration camps. You guys can have Berlin. And Stalin wanted Berlin. Okay, he was mad, understandably so. On April 28th, the Italian people fought back. They turned on Mussolini. They grabbed him and they shot and killed him, and then hanged him in the streets in northern Italy, where he still was there, right? Because they just took up the Rome. They didn't get the north. So now Mussolini is on TV. April 28th, hung, shot, dead by the Italian people who just turned on him. Okay, Hitler was hiding out in his bunker for the last 5 months of the war. A little cowardly there, Hitler. You afraid? Hitler. Thought you were so tough, didn't you? Little small guy, couldn't handle anyone walking down the street. So he is in this bunker, In his last statement, he blames the Jews for the wars, of course. And on May 7th, 1945, the German commanders surrender. On April 30th, Hitler commits a suicide. Here's an image of what his bunker looked like. You can see over top, this was buildings. And he was underground for 5 straight months, he and his mistress, Eva Braun. And the story goes that she drank poison, and then he drank poison, maybe. Is that what happened? And then he shot himself after the poison wasn't working fast enough or whatever. But the Russians were entering Berlin when this happens, okay? And then the Germans surrender. World War II is over in Europe in May, but it's still going on in Asia, okay? And if you take a look, we can remember back that 1943, 1942, Midway Island was taken. The Americans and the Brits won the Battle of the Coral Sea. And slowly now we're going to see that the Solomon Islands are taken back by the Americans and mostly the Americans, really not the Brits as much. This Pacific battle was almost all American. And we're going to see that they're going to go from island to island, Wake Island, Marshall Islands, Gilbert Islands, Caroline Islands, Mariana Islands, Palau Islands, and they're just gonna each battle is a battle. The Philippines, the Dutch, every island is a huge battle, and every time the Americans win. It takes a lot of time, it costs a lot of lives. You can see some dates here. 1944 in Guam, and 1944, 1945 Iwo Jima, 1944 the Philippines, 1944. The Filipino Sea. Looking even further, you can see Manila over here, March 1945, Okinawa, April and June. That's a long battle for Okinawa, okay, which was the southern Japanese island, 1945. Saigon, 1944. It's a slow but steady march back, right? And they're gonna take it back. Manila is the Philippines, March 1945. And slowly but surely, there's maps in your book, they're going to take back island by island until they have all of the Pacific Ocean back under the control of the US. Okay? And then comes the consequential, one of the biggest decisions in world history. And President Harry Truman gets a phone call from the military. And they say, Mr. Truman, we have this weapon. And it looks like it's the most powerful weapon in the history of mankind. Would you like to use it? Or would you like to try and invade mainland Japan without this weapon? Remember, each island costs a lot of lives. We're talking about tens of thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives on the Japanese side, in each island. And the estimates were that if the US were to go and attack mainland Japan, it could be 100,000 US deaths, it could be 1 million Japanese deaths. So they say to him, look, Truman, if you don't use this right now, you might be considered a traitor for allowing so many Americans to die and trying to invade that island of Japan. It would be incredibly tough. And Truman says, drop it. So preparations begin on August 6, 1945. The first atomic bomb in the history of the world is dropped. It hits Hiroshima, Japan, which had a military base. So Americans oftentimes will say, look, at least we didn't hit Tokyo. We could have killed so many more people if we were out to get civilians, but we hit 2 military targets. We hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We never hit Tokyo. These are the images of these atomic bombs from the planes as they drove away. They would explode down here, move up, and there's our mushroom cloud that is so synonymous with nuclear weapons, and everything was knocked out. I showed you images of it earlier, where this is not a bombed out building. Okay, this isn't like, hey, we got some damage to our buildings, which is what happens in much of that's what happens in a lot of European cities and in firebombed cities. They look like this. They look bombed out, right? England, this is what it looked like after bombs would hit your city. And this is what it looks like after the nuclear bomb hit your city. Nothing. Just zero, right? Just flattens the entire city. And And that's it, folks. And war's over. Okay. Another example of the nuclear. I'm not sure what that is. There's our bombed out nuclear city. So as we then look and the war is over, we ask ourselves, how many people died in this war? And it's estimated that over 17 million soldiers died, that 20 million civilians died. Some estimates are that it was 50,000 people total dead. Here's a chart I want you to look at. What you can see in this chart, that the large majority of deaths are from the Soviet Union and China. Next online, so this is 20 million deaths in the Soviet Union alone. This is an astronomical number. The Soviets got hit the hardest. China, 15 million deaths from Japanese. That's an incredible amount of deaths. Germany then was 7. Poland, 6. Most of those were Holocaust deaths. This includes civilians and soldiers. The Polish didn't fight that long against it was like a 2-week war, maybe 6-week war against the Germans at the beginning, 1943. There was not, these are Holocaust deaths, right? Dutch East Indies, the Japanese, oh my gosh, what they did to Indonesia. 3 million deaths. Japan itself, next. British Raj, that's India, and a lot of that has to do with the British starving the Indians for their food. Another untold part of this history that we've heard about. There's Yugoslavia, French Indochina, Vietnam. And down here is France, less than a million. They didn't fight that long, right? A lot of these were Holocaust. Well, some of these were Holocaust deaths, not a lot. Philippines, Greece, and really, what the reason I'm even getting here is Greece, Romania, Italy is 500,000. We haven't hit the U.S. yet. Here's the U.S. coming in at about 400 something thousand. UK less than 500,000. So, and then smaller numbers all the way down here. 40,000 or less, and Iran, Egypt. Small Iraq, these are teeny numbers down there. Not that any death is teeny. But the US again escapes the true wrath. Even Britain, the island, doesn't get hit hard, even though they're in Europe. It's mainland Europe, and it's China, in the areas the Japanese took over, that suffer the very, very most from this war. World War II is over. Now the question is, what comes next? How do we rebuild? Let's not do what we did in Versailles. And that will be a big feature of the rebuild.